Welcome to the REI Diamond Interview, your source for real estate investment jewels of wisdom with Dan Breslin.
Welcome to the REI Diamond Interview, your source for real estate investment jewels of wisdom. I'm Dan Breslin, and on these REI Diamond Interviews, I bring you the real estate investment community's brightest mind. Today I'm here with a special guest, Bill Becker. Bill is the founder, CEO, and president of the American Real Estate Investors Institute, located in Westmont, New Jersey, a company specializing in the education of real estate investors throughout the Delaware Valley, tri-state area, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Bill also is the author of 5 real estate investment training books and 3 personal development books. He's recorded 18 educational and motivational CDs, been a guest speaker and instructor for other nationally known real estate investment programs and real estate investment clubs across America. Bill has also been an instructor and guest lecturer at Temple University, Rutgers University, and Drexel University, and has conducted classes in real estate investment at various community colleges throughout the Delaware Valley. Bill is also very active and serving as a board member on 2 nonprofits that benefit those in need, and that is CORA in Philadelphia and Starting Point in Westmont, New Jersey. So with that, got Bill on the line. So Bill, I'd like to welcome you on to the interview.
Good morning, Dan. Thank you for having me on the interview.
You're welcome, and we're looking forward to a great call here. So we have a lot of people throughout the country that do listen into this, although most of our audience is located and concentrated in Philadelphia area, the greater Philadelphia area, and the greater Chicagoland area. But why don't we start off, Bill? Tell us how you first got involved. You know, what was your life before real estate investing? And I know you're a very active investor, so how'd you get started?
Yes, like most people, I was always interested in real estate, didn't really know how to get involved, and started going to some seminars and, kind of seminars that you give and clubs. And I used to work for the city of Philadelphia. I was their director of property management. And what happened was one day my boss walked in and said, Friday's going to be your last day. We got a new mayor in town, so it was a political appointment. And the interesting part was I was going to let my wife down easy and take her out to dinner a couple of nights later, and she read in the front page of the newspaper the next day that Bill Becker, was fired by the city, and she was not a happy camper. And when I saw her crying at the breakfast table when she read it, I said, I'm never going to work for anybody again. If anybody's going to fire me, it's going to be me. And we were just like everybody else. We were living paycheck to paycheck, week to week, with 3 kids in parochial school, and the only car we had was the city car, and that was gone with the job. But nevertheless, I had been nosing around in real estate part-time, so I decided to get involved in sheriff sales, and there's something in Philadelphia called the tax sales, which were very, very lucrative and still are. And so I decided, let me get involved in that. I didn't have a lot of money. I had a few $100, a couple $1,000 on a credit card, and that was it. So I went to the tax sale, and but before I went and looked at this property, which looked pretty good. It was in the Kensington section of Philadelphia, low to middle income area, and I went and knocked on the door. Young man answered the door. I told him I thought this property might be up for sale. Didn't want to tell him it was up for a tax sale. And he said, well, I rent here, so come on in, take a look, and if you get the property, I'd like to stay here. He was paying like $350 a month rent. And the property was actually pretty nice, and especially the recreation room downstairs where he had a beer meister and a pool table. So we talked about real estate, and then I said to him, sure, you can stay here if I get the property. So the next day I went to the tax sale, and the auctioneer said 3133 Trenton Avenue, and that was the address. And I jumped up and I said, okay, $300. That was the opening bid. So they said $300 once, twice. Oh, somebody else jumped in. They said $400. And we started bidding back and forth, hot and heavy. I won the bid for $4,000. I was so excited. I ran down to the front of the room. Money was coming out of my pocket. People helped me pick it up. My hand was shaking so much I had to hold it with 2 hands to sign the documents, ran to the back of the room. I couldn't wait to go out and collect my rent, shoot some pool, have a beer, talk about some more real estate. So after the sale, the guy that was bidding against me came over to me and said to me, "Hey, pal, I've seen you here before. You never bought anything." I says, "No." I says, "It's my first property." He says, "Let me ask you a question. I was bidding against you, and I just want to know what you're going to do with that empty lot." And I said, "Empty lot?" He said, "Yeah, pal, you just bought an empty lot for $4,000. I said, "What?" And so I was a little disappointed, and I went out to my empty lot and looked at it, and here it was the wrong address. Instead of 3133 Trenton Avenue. Now, this is the kicker. The address is 3133 Witt Street, like in half-wit. It's a true story. And anyhow, I didn't see anything on the lot except the factory next door, and I went and knocked on the door of the factory, and the young guy answered the door, and I said, "I just bought the lot at the tax sale. Anybody in here want to buy it? It's right next to your property." And he said, "No, we're not buying lots. We're not buying magazines. We're not buying anything." But Dan, here came the biggest challenge of my entire married life. You see, I had been telling my wife that we were going to become millionaires in real estate. And I didn't tell her what I was going to buy or anything. I was going to surprise her. So I went home and threw my arms around her and hugged her and said, "Okay, we're in real estate, babe." She said, "Oh, good. Let's go see the property." I said, "No, that's okay. Yeah, that's okay. I can handle this, alpha male, so forth, so on." Well, she said, "No, listen, we got to go see the property." So we jumped in this 1970 Gremlin station wagon that I bought for $300, and went down and drove around the neighborhood, and I finally pulled up in front of the property, and she says, I don't see anything. What'd you buy?" I said, "Well, I bought this lot." And she said, "You bought an empty lot in Kensington?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "What, are you crazy?" Well, we had a talk for about an hour after that, and you guys that are listening know what those talks are about. But then I drove around and started taking down the names of other factories in the neighborhood. The next couple of days I'm on the phone. So people were hanging up on me, cursing me and whatnot. "What, are you crazy? I want to buy that empty lot. I wouldn't take it if he gave it to me." But here's what happened. A couple of days later, which is about a week out from the time I bought it, the owner of the factory that I went to had called me back because I had given him the kid my phone number. And he said, "I knew about that tax sale, and I had forgotten all about it." And he said to me, "Would you like to sell it?" And I said, "I'll be right down." Well, I didn't know that Gremlin station wagon could go 300 miles an hour, Dan,
Nice.
But it did. I shot down there, and I remember from negotiating class that the one that names the price first is at a disadvantage. So I introduced myself. The guy's name was Joe. I said, "Joe," how much do you think you can give me for that lot?" And he says, "I don't know, Bill. How much do you think you want for it?" And I said, "Well, what do you think it's worth?" And he said, "I don't know, Bill. What do you think it's worth?" Well, I quickly figured out he went to the same negotiating classes that I did. But here's what he did. He said, "Look, I was going to go to that tax sale, forgot about it. I wasn't going to pay any more than a couple $1,000 for it." So I said, "Well, I'm going to be real straight with you, Joe." I said, I paid $4,000 for it, put down 10% deposit, and I got 20 days to come up with the balance, and I can sell it to you for $6,000. I'm not greedy. And if you don't want to buy it, and I take this list out of my pocket, I said, I've been calling some of these other folks, and Dan, right on the top of the list was Zimmerman Heating and Cooling. Now, I don't know what Joe had against Mr. Zimmerman, but he turned a crimson red, and I swore smoke was coming out of his ears, started cursing like a banshee. I'm not going to let him have it. How much do you want? Okay, do you need a deposit? I mean, he was stumbling around. And I said, I need a $500 deposit. So he wrote out a check for $200 and gave me $300 cash. And he said, when do you want to settle? And I said, well, it's too late now for us to go down to the courthouse, the sheriff's office, but we can do this first thing Monday. First thing Monday, I said, I'll meet you down in front of St. Peter's, 13th and Market, and we'll walk over to the sheriff's office. So I got down there about 8:45 in the morning. We were to meet at 9 and went into the church and said, oh, God, please have him show up. He showed up 9 o'clock, walked over. Dan, we walked over to the sheriff's office, and you know what this is about. I assigned him my bid right over and made $2,000. And I said, Becker, if you can screw up this bad and still make $2,000 on the deal, you're in the right place. And that was some 30-plus years ago. And things have been going really good ever since, and real estate is fantastic. So I'm sorry it took so long, but, actually sometimes I take longer.
Man, that's nuts, Bill. I mean, $6,000 for a vacant lot in Kensington. I make offers of, 4,000 to 5,000, 6,000 on houses in Kensington. And this is like, what did you say, 20, 30 years ago?
Yeah.
It's funny how the first deal.
He didn't want Zimmerman to get it. He would have paid $10,000 for it.
Wow.
That taught me a lesson. That's like, the lesson was that if you got something that somebody wants, then you're in the driver's seat. Just got to find out what it is.
Yeah, that's pretty solid there. I've found that, at least in the students that I worked with and my own experience, and I see it in your experience, that it seems like sometimes you get lucky on that first deal and the first deal closes without a hitch. I imagine you've had some deals that you've run into that have been challenging, and I'm going to ask you about that. But first I want to talk about, we all have usually a crowning jewel deal. I know that you have one, Bill. So what will be the deal that marks your entire career, at least up until this point so far?
Right. Yeah, I'm working on the crown on top of the crown, which we'll talk about later.
Nice.
But the first big deal that I made was a commercial deal, because I did a lot. I bought and sold well over 100 properties when I first got started and did really well, and decided I wanted to get involved in commercial real estate, and particularly office buildings. And I had kind of a love for shared office space, because actually I was in a shared office space, and I'm looking at the numbers these guys were making. They were making something like $50 a square foot renting this out. And I said, if I could find an empty building, a near empty building, I could do this. So I started calling some commercial realtors and said to them, what do you got on the books? Now, this is way back when. This is some 25 years ago. Maybe not quite that long, but pretty close to it. And we were in the same kind of market that we are today, with a lot of foreclosures. And there was something out there called the Resolution Trust Corporation, and there was nothing selling. Commercial, residential, nothing. We were all the way down the bottom. And that's a good time to buy, obviously. So this commercial guy took me through a number of properties in South Jersey, and three particular ones I looked at. One was bid out from underneath me, and the other two was between a property in Cherry Hill, 41,000 square foot office building. So I looked up the numbers, and I said to the realtor, I said, what's this guy want for it? And he said, well, the building's really worth like $4 million, and it was foreclosed on, and that looks like they took a hit for about $2 million, and they were asking 1.6. And I did the numbers, and actually I did the numbers on a napkin, a Dunkin' Donuts napkin, across the street from the building, and I said, Bob, this guy's the realtor, I said, I can't offer more than $800,000. He said, I don't think they're going to take it. I said, well, put the offer in anyhow. So he put the offer in, and they dropped down to 1.2, and I went up to 900,000, and then they dropped down to 1.1, and the realtor called me up and said, the guy wants to meet you out in Malvern from the bank. So I met him out there, and he said, Bill, he says, obviously you're serious about this. You know what the number is, and I know what the number is, $1 million. I said, that's right. That's the best I can do is $1 million. Well, this is a true story. We shook hands. He said, have your attorney contact my attorney, and let's settle this. Now, the building was virtually empty, except for one small tenant. And I said to myself, okay, you got the deal. Now what are you going to do? How are you going to come up with the money? So I'm very, very creative, and from teaching students, and I was teaching back then as well, in Temple, Drexel, places like that, I had a short list of people that I thought might be interested in partnering up with me. So actually I sent out a whole bunch of letters to people that are interested in buying a building with me for $1 million that was worth $4 million. And I got half a dozen returns and weeded them out, and this one particular guy was to be my silent partner. So he said, whatever you need, I'll be glad to put up. So I said, well, I only need $400,000 at this point because I'm going to get the bank to take back $800,000, and we need $200,000 for seed money to get the building fixed up. So he said, okay, you got it. So I went to the bank and I put all the paperwork together, and I said, here's the deal. I want you to give me a mortgage for $800,000, and I'll make it a 5-year balloon. In other words, I'll need everything. I'll pay everything off in 5 years, but I need a 30-year amortization. Well, the bank was really upset because he said, I thought this was a cash deal. And I said, well, I never said anything about a cash deal, and I didn't hear you say anything about a cash deal. So he called up his boss, actually, which was over in Canada, and told him about me. And I said, this guy teaches people. He's going to Drexel and Temple and all this other stuff, and he's a good guy. And so he says, okay, give him the deal, and but if he defaults, we're going to take the building off him right away. Now, here's something I did that I had up my sleeve. I said, I'll tell you what, in reference to that, if you pull this deal together for me, I'll sign over a deed in lieu of foreclosure. Well, basically what that means is they wouldn't have to foreclose on me. They would just come and take the building because they didn't want to foreclose again on somebody else. So I bought the $1 million building with no money out of my pocket. And on top of that, the story doesn't end there. I stayed there for almost 20 years, but what I did was give myself a sweetheart lease for 6 years to run successively for 3 terms. In other words, I could have stayed there 18 years, which I stayed more than that, at a ridiculous sum of $8 a square foot, including all electric. And I could take as much space as I want. And that's where I operated my school from for many years. But 4 years later, I put the building on the market. And unbeknownst to me, the guy that sold me the building said, I got a buyer for you, and he's willing to give you $2.2 million. I said, I'm there. Sign me up. So I sold the building for $2.2, still stayed in the building, put $1 million in my pocket, and split the profits with my partner. Then that partner that bought the building became my partner in Costa Rica, which is going to be the crowning glory on top of the crowning glory. So he sold it to somebody else for $3.1. So he made himself $900,000. This is like 4 or 5 years later. And that person bought the building, refinanced it for $4.1, and that was about 5 years ago. And he let it go down the tubes. He didn't do anything to the building, and somebody else bought it from them for $2 million. And I decided to move out when the property was getting renovated and move into my auxiliary office in Westmont. But, you know, it's anybody can do these deals if they have enough faith and hope, and they're creative enough and believe that they can do it. So, you know, that's a renowned story throughout South Jersey. You call up any commercial realtor who says, oh, yeah, Becker bought that building for no money down and made $1 million on it 4 years later and stayed in it for 20 years. So that's my crowning jewel up to now. And of course, what's going to happen next is my Costa Rica project, but when you're ready, we can talk about that. I'm sure you've got deals like that, too. By the way, you had mentioned that, you know, not all deals were really, really great. I bought a property down the shore once, and then thought I was going to make $500,000 on it. Instead, I lost $300,000 on. So, but I got involved in something I didn't know what I was doing with, and I didn't have any mentors or any teachers. I thought I knew it all, and that's what happens. You know, you always have to ask for advice, and I didn't, and I got burned. So.
What kind of deal was that? Is there something you could share with me that would help somebody avoid a similar situation, like some specifics of that one, Bill?
Yeah, sure. What it was is that when the market was hot some years ago, I was looking around for properties. Actually, I owned a ERA franchise with partners in Ocean City and in Summers Point and actually in Philadelphia. And so these deals would come up, and there's one particular deal in Longport on the beach that I looked at. And now, it was $900,000, but here was the deal. Next door to the property on the beach, somebody had bought a property for the same price, $900,000, tore it down, and built a $3.4 million property. Cost him $600,000 to build it. So if you add $600 on top of the $900, that's $1.5, and he sold it for over $3 million. I said I could do the same thing. So I bought the property for $900,000, my partner and I, and we went and got all the architect's drawings and everything that was needed. All of a sudden, the city comes in of Longford and says that you're not allowed to build up more than 1.5 stories. On top of that, everything was at a moratorium. Everything was frozen. Now, Dan, my partner and I were paying $10,000 a month for the mortgage on that property, plus taxes. That was just eating away at our bottom line. So, wind up, make a long story short, we had to give the building back, the house back to the bank. But that was after 5 years of fighting that and trying to make it work. So the moral of the story is that you got to do your homework ahead of time. And, it looked like a good deal going in, and probably would have been if there hadn't been any moratorium. But I guess what I should have done is got somebody to say, okay, that was involved with the township or the city politics, and say, what are they doing here with these shorefront properties? Just didn't have enough information. So you need the story on the property, number one, and you need information about what the township or the city is doing in their future. That's key. And I tell all my students, I said, if you're going to develop a project, whether it's tearing down a house or doing a huge renovation, go to a city council meeting, a township council meeting, find out what's going on, and then you'll avoid those kinds of things that I went through. Now, it didn't bankrupt me, but it came close. But I did have 5 years of pretty good beachfront property there that took my grandkids to, so that was a good part of it. Because my partner didn't like the beach, he liked the mountains. And I said, okay. I said, go down there whenever you want. So that was a good part of it.
Well, that's cool. I guess every cloud has a silver lining, but that's great. I'm taking tons of notes, and I hope anybody else listening is too. So let's switch gears back to the positive again, and let's talk about what you got going on now. I know we've been friends for maybe, 5 years, Bill?
Yep.
I don't think Costa Rica was started yet when we met, right?
Well, there's always a story with Bill Becker, and it's everybody will tell you that if you spend more than an hour with him, he'll go at least through one or two stories. And there's always some sort of moral to the story as well. So, as I said to you, remember that the first property of the office building, the guy that I sold the building to actually had become my partner in Costa Rica. I had actually gone down to Costa Rica for a fellow by the name of Russ Whitney, who you know. He said to me, he says, there's some property down there. Why don't you take a look at it and, become one of my junior partners? So I flew down there and actually took a buddy of mine down there, and we went fishing, and we looked at the property that he was going to buy, and we were excited. I mean, we were so excited with the people down there. Now I'm going back 11, 12 years ago. And Bob, my friend who I went fishing with, said, Bill, is there any way I can get in on this deal? And I says, well, let me talk to Russ and let's see what we can do. So I came back and I said, here's the deal. I want to buy this property. I want to go into partnership with it because I know you're a pretty good businessman, Mr. Whitney. And so he said, okay, if you want to bring in a couple partners, that's up to you. Now, I had just become friendly with John, who had purchased my office building, and told him I had gone down there to Costa Rica, and this was really going to be a good deal. So he says, well, how much do you need? And I says, well, the whole deal is $100,000. I said, I'm going to put up $34,000, and you and Bob are going to put up the rest. So $66,000. I guess that comes out right. Anyhow, he said, okay, I'm in. He gave me a check, sight unseen, just during a conversation right then and there. Called up Russ. I said, I'm in for the $100,000. Make a long story short, which sometimes is difficult for me, that converted into a $450,000 profit 5 years later. Matter of fact, I'll never forget, Russ calling me up and says, am I the man? Am I the man? I said, what are you talking about? He says, well, we sold our deal, and you and your partners are going to net $450,000. I said, Russ, you can call yourself whatever you want. You're the man. We took that and we actually put that into another piece of ground, 12 acres on the beach, my partners and I, and we spent $275,000 for the 12 acres, and then we spent most of the other money on developing the plans and so forth. Now, if you remember back in 2008, things were moving, were hot and heavy, but then all of a sudden the roof fell in. My partner, the one that I sold the building to, went down there and said, Bill, he says, we're involved in this deal down here. He says, I don't think we should start building. I said, okay, why not? He says, something's going on, and it's the world market. So we didn't do anything, and good thing we didn't, because 9 out of 10 developers in Costa Rica lost their shirt. We owned and still own the property free and clear. And so it's a good thing that we didn't do any developing. Now, what we've got going on now for the last couple of years, we've had builders sort of courting us and saying to us, look, we'll build the properties, you just put up the land and we'll split the profits. So our first property is going up in October. We're just crossing the T's and dotting the I's now with the builders in Costa Rica. And we'll turn our, I guess, $400,000 investment into somewhere close to about $1.3 million each by the time they're all sold, which will take about, maybe 2 or 3 years or less. Actually, I started talking to people about it, and I got 3 of them sold just by word of mouth. They said, because the property is going to be really inexpensive, $195,000 all the way up to $215,000. And these are like 1,500 square foot brand new properties looking at the ocean with the mountain behind you. And it's about 15 minutes from highly resorted area there, a place called Jaco Beach. It's Jaco. So that's exciting. And, that's my crowning glory on top of my crowning glory. And actually what we're doing is getting options on buying the ground adjacent to our property as well. So that's going to be going great guns there very soon. Now, of course, I go down there during the wintertime when it's cold up here. Not that it's ever cold down there. It isn't, to check out the properties. So it's a tax write-off as well. So that's what I got going now, in addition to doing my consulting, in addition to doing my mentoring, teaching, doing my seminars, which I'd love to do. It's kind of my way of giving back to people. So, and I only take a half a dozen or so people on every year in my personal mentoring program, as you know. And that's kind of fun for me because that means I'm kind of doing the deals with newbies again.
That's cool. It keeps it fresh. Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit, Bill. I mean, what type of student would be the ideal student? If someone's listening right now, I mean, what should their background be if they're going to get the most out of a relationship with you or be qualified to even be selected to be one of the 6 or 7 people that you work with one-on-one?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because there is a qualifying interview. And that's a qualification that goes on both sides. And because I want them to qualify me, I want to tell them a little bit about myself. And, of course, with the Internet today, you can find out whatever you want about Bill Becker by just Googling my name and, of course, going to my website as well. So, which is, by the way, if I could put a plug in here for myself, AREII.com, or American Real Estate Investors Institute. So when the ideal person is someone that will meet the qualifications, my qualifications, and it's really only 3, but they're pretty strong. Number one, they have to have the time to do this. So many people jump into this game, and they don't have the time to do it, and that's a huge stumbling block. How much time? They always say to me, how much time do I need? I said, well, it depends on how successful do you want. Do you want to be a part-timer or a full-timer? I tell them if you put in 5 to 10 hours a week working with me, you'll wind up buying 1 or 2 properties a year. And I'm real honest with them. I don't tell them they're going to buy 100 properties. And the more time you put in, the more properties that you'll get. So number 1 is a qualification. They must have a minimum of 5 and preferably 10 hours a week. Not only study time, but looking at deals. And I've got what I call my 12-session plan. It's not necessarily a time-oriented, even though I call it 3 to 6 months. because that's usually what takes them to get their first deals, anywhere between 3 to 6 months. There are some racehorses out there that'll do it before that, but not many. So number one is time. Number two is resources or access to those resources, meaning money. That's important. The less money people have, the harder it's going to be for them, and the longer it's going to take them. I tell them right up front. And not that I won't take them, because the third option, or the third qualification, is that they must have the can-do, make-it-happen attitude. The glass of water is half full, and always is. Not pie in the sky, but let's be positive. Let's make it happen. Go over or around any roadblocks that you have. So to summarize that, the three qualifications are: one, they must have the time; two, they must have access to resources or have the resources themselves; and number three is the attitude that they can make it happen with a positive attitude. Once somebody has those three, it never fails. I have a huge success rate with that. My success rate is well into the 80 percentile. And I know some people say, well, what happens to the other 15 or 20%? I said, well, that's because they don't follow my direction and they blow themselves up after they left the mentoring program. Because I do something that no one else does that I'm aware of in the industry. What I do is I virtually say to them, listen, you're going to get a deal signed, or I'm going to mentor you for free until you do. And that's in a contract. And I sign it, and they sign it. So I don't believe anybody else is doing it. When I take somebody on, it's like I'm taking on my own son or nephew or niece or daughter. I give it my all. And like I said, I don't take that many people on at a time, but I enjoy it so much. I enjoy it because I see them succeed. And that's important. I set a foundation for them. I say, okay, what are your goals? Let's be realistic about it. How much time are you going to put into it? I want to see your Google Calendar of how much time you actually put in. And we're going to meet either on a weekly or every other weekly basis, one-on-one, face-to-face, so I know what your progress is. There's 12 sessions that covers virtually the whole gamut, and that takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months for them to go through it. And what they can expect out of it is at least one deal. And I'm not going to mention it on the air, but everybody has a different price structure. I don't, and I don't have any upsells or anything like that. You know, when you come to my program, the fee is set. That's it, and we meet one-on-one. And also, they have the advantage of meeting with some of my other students as well. And Dan, you spoke at one of my classes. I also throw in classes which I don't charge for. They may be on different subjects, like what your expertise is on, which is flipping and wholesaling properties, which is a huge benefit because a lot of people, that's the first thing they want to do is start making money right away, and which you're so good at.
Appreciate that, Bill.
You are. And I tell all my people, I said, you got to start going to those ring meetings over in Manioc and have a beer for me while you're there.
Nice. I'm sure you have a ton of success stories from doing this for so long with so many students, but are there any that jump to mind now that you'd want to share of somebody who came through and, one of the resources there?
Yeah, I have a lot of them, but the one particular one is this gentleman. I'm not going to say his name, but he was down on his luck. He had a restaurant that was failing, which he put a lot of money into, and because it was failing, his credit was down the toilet as well. And he came to me a couple of years ago and said, I need your help. I've got enough money for your fee. I know what your fee is, but I've got 3 small kids, and my wife's pregnant. And my business is not doing well, so I've really got to make this happen. And what can you do for me? So I outlined the program. He followed it to the T. I mean, to the T. His goals were to make $110,000 for that year, because he said that's what I need to meet my expenses. And I said, that's good. I said, okay. And he says, I'm going to do it by flipping houses. Okay, that's good. So that was part of what his goals were, and we met every week. And after about a month that he was into the program, he said, I come across this house in Springfield in Delaware County, and this looks pretty good, and I put it into your software because I give everybody my software when it comes into the program. I don't charge them for it, and the software is really, really great. I said, put all the numbers in the software, and because I won't accept any deals unless I see the numbers in the software. So he sent me a software, and I said, well, looks like you're going to have how much are you spending for the property? He says, well, they want $210,000, and it needs about $100,000 worth of work. I said, okay. And I said, what's the fair market value? He says, probably around $400,000. And I said, well, that looks like a pretty good deal, but where are you going to come up with the money? And that was kind of an open-ended question because he said it back to me, well, where am I going to come up with the money? I said, well, what you can do is you can get hard money. All you have to do is figure the numbers in, and if they work, they work. Well, as it turned out, he got hard money, and I gave him a couple of people to get some hard money from. And he worked, and he was a racehorse. He worked his buns off to get the property up, and actually he had somebody come in and stage the property for him. Actually, my wife went over there and told him what color paint to paint the kitchen and whatnot. He was going to paint some horrible color. I don't know. Not that I know or care, but wives and women know all that stuff. I don't. So he got it staged, and I said, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to put it on the market for yourself for the first 30 days for sale by owner. Now, he was a realtor. He had his real estate license, wasn't real. And so he had to come up, regardless, it still had to be 3%. So he called me up the Sunday he had the open house, the first day he had the open house, and he was excited. He said, Bill, he said, I had 3 all-cash offers on a property, not at $399, but at $450. So you told me to put it up a little higher, and then because you can always come down. He says, I put it up at $450 and had 3 cash offers on the property. Well, he closed that deal total from the time he walked in my door until the time he finished it, did all the construction, and closed it, was a total of 4 months. He didn't make his $110,000. He made $109,400. That was his net profit after paying all the hard money, after everything. And that is, like I said, that happened about a year and a half ago. Yeah, just about a year and a half ago at this point. So if somebody like that can do it, anybody listening can certainly do it. It's just a matter of focus and following the direction that I've had and experienced over the years. And it's not just successful experience, it's an experience that I've had that I've been beat up about too. Because you don't want to go down the road that somebody had an accident on, that's for sure. So I steer him away from that. And this young man, he's still going strong. He's doing a lot of smaller properties now, but he says he's forever thankful for that one big property that really got him out of the hole. And as we talk, there's another one, another young racehorse. He actually came to my program, I guess, in March, and he's working a full-time job, and he is actually finishing the property, putting it up for sale next week, and his net profit will be approximately $40,000, and the property is being sold for $20,000 under market. So these are some of the things that our people can do.
Seemed like the power of setting the goal, huh? He literally set the goal for $110,000, and ironically,
amazing.
That goal right on the head, huh?
I can't tell you how often that's happened. When I was working for the city, I was making good money for 30-plus years ago. It was $38,000. So I set a goal for myself to make at least that much my first year in investing in real estate. And I didn't quite make that. I made $36,000 my first year. But I'm a strong believer in the power of goals. I'm a strong believer in reviewing your goals and moving ahead and always thinking, how can I make this work better? And you learn from your mistakes. I've made mistakes. My students, I steer them away from making the same mistakes, but once they're out of my program, I can't stop them from making mistakes, and they'll call me back up and they'll say, you know what, I think I need a refresher because I screwed up a deal. So, and actually I have some people that are on a monthly retainer with me as well that I do the mentoring for them, and Most of it's done by phone and the internet, but I will go out and look at properties. So when they're ready to do the deal, and occasionally go to a closing. So it's kind of fun for me. So between, my consulting and my mentoring, and I do a lot of charity work. In fact, we're on the phone now. I'm calling from CORA. We're about to have this retirement party. The guy has been here for 44 years. So I do a lot of charity work and as well, because you got to give back. There's no question about that. I call it tithing. I started it when I first started over 30 years ago. Took 10 cents out of every dollar and gave it away. Doesn't matter who you give it to as long as you're giving it away, because it comes back 100 times, believe me. Been there, done it, and I can tell you that for a fact.
Nice. I want to touch on one thing that I noticed we talked about on a few of the deals, and I'm pretty sure that you look at this the same way that I do, but there's a competing philosophy for getting into the business and doing deals, which I found to be detrimental, and that's kind of like, hey, I need all the profit for myself, as opposed to the investors who get into the business and their philosophy is like half the deal is better than no deal. And you talked about a couple profit splits, especially on some of the bigger deals that you've had. Do you kind of want to elaborate on that line of thinking in comparison to the, I got to keep the whole deal type of thinking, Bill?
Sure. When I get involved with a deal, the first thing I do is say to the people, whether the buyers, sellers, or partners, or profit sharing, or whatever it is, what are you looking for? So, in other words, I find out what they need from the deal. Now, I said, okay, let's see if this works. This is what you need, whatever that number is or whatever that percentage is. Let me see if it works for me. So I do my numbers again. I said, you know what? This works for me, so let's move ahead. Or it doesn't work, or let's adjust it so it works for both of us. So it's a question of not keeping all the profits. You have to make the deal work for the other person first. And a lot of people said, well, aren't you kind of cheating yourself? I said, no, I'm not, because if it doesn't work for me, I'm not going to do the deal. It's pretty simple philosophy, and I've always had that philosophy, and it's always worked for me. Now, for the people out there that are greedy, they kind of eliminate themselves from the deal. And, they're going to have wished they would have done the deal with me, because maybe they would have done the deal and all of a sudden it blew up in their face and they wind up with no profits or worse. So I make the deal. The bottom line is I make the deal work for everybody.
Write some things down here.
Yep.
So we're starting to get close to the top of the hour here, and I got a final question or two here that I want you to answer two ways, Bill. I want you to answer this first for the investor who's just getting started, and second for the seasoned investor, somebody who's done a bunch of deals, or maybe a lot of deals, or certainly they've done a few. The question is, do you have any final jewels of wisdom to share with our listeners, Bill?
Well, yes, I do. Again, it goes back to what I just talked a little bit about, making the deal work for the other party. That has to be right there, and also that you need some sort of a system to work with. It just can't be willy-nilly or at random. I have what I call my ABC system. A, you flip a property out and you make a profit because you need money to eat with, or you need some spare money or to pay some bills. B is you want to get properties that are going to give you positive cash flow of at least $200 per unit. They're going to be medium term, not necessarily long term, medium term, because some people after a while don't like property management. So you're going to make $200 a month on each one. That's B. C, you are going to buy properties for long term because you know they're going to appreciate. Now, I know that's kind of like a really explosive question. How do you know they're going to appreciate? Well, you look at the history of the neighborhood, for instance, like Malvern and Bryn Mawr and places like that. You know that they're going to appreciate. You go back 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you see that they've appreciated. So you buy those kind of properties in those neighborhoods knowing it's going to appreciate at least 6%. So if the property is worth $300,000 and it appreciates 6%, that means it's going to go up at least $18,000 a year, and then it's going to be compounded. So again, quickly on that, A, buy property to turn it over quickly. Now that could mean signing the contract out to somebody, which is what you do a lot of, or doing a light to medium rehab or a full-blown rehab like the gentleman did in Springfield that made $109,000. And so you have that A property, and then you have the B property that's going to give you steady cash flow coming in every month. And then you have the C property that's going to be appreciating, even if it may even cost you $100 or $200 a month. You know it's going to appreciate because you'll be able to sell it when the market's hot and make a lot of money. So that's the system, A, B, C. So if I were to give them two real jewels, one would be have a system in place, and the first one is make sure the deal works for everybody. Now, part of the system also is being able to evaluate the property properly. That's one of the reasons that I give my mentees my software, which I call the Investor's Napkin. And the reason I call it the Investor's Napkin is because I wrote a lot of deals on a Dunkin' Donuts napkin like I did when I bought that $1 million building with no money down. So it's kind of like a little funny thing with me. So, and actually the banks love to hear it. They say, oh, yeah, Becker's napkin. Oh, we like his napkin. And it's now in the 8.0. So every one of my mentees gets that as part of it at no charge, and that's what they put all the numbers in. So you got to evaluate all the numbers. I don't care how good you are, how smart you are, how good your memory is. You still have to put it someplace that we can refer back to. So, and as you know, part of that is the basis of a good foundation for real estate is 80% of the deal is actually the rehab and the financing. And the other 20%, well, you got a number of other things in there, such as location, the price, and so forth, so on. But that's the two major issues. I should say 80% of a deal would be the rehab and the financing. That's where you're going to make your money.
Nice. Bill, you mentioned the charity work that you do. Would you like to share information on contact information or some way if people wanted to get involved, either making donations or volunteering time? Is that something you'd like to share, some contact info for that piece?
Sure, absolutely. My number one charity is CORA, C-O-R-A. It's a CORA organization, which stands for Children's Organizations and Referral Agency. And they help almost 30,000 families in the Delaware Valley every year, whether they can afford it or not, to come in for counseling, family counseling, and anything that's needed. They come here. Actually, this is where I'm at right now. So if you go to CORA, CORA organization, you can donate online, and we have various and sundry events during the course of the year as well. Certainly they can contact me. I can get them involved with it, either as a volunteer or just if they'd like to donate to help out the needy families in the Delaware Valley. I mean, Delaware Valley, I'm talking about New Jersey and the 5 counties surrounding Philadelphia, including Philadelphia. They've been around for 45 years. Started by a little nun called Sister Charity, who kind of put the arm on me about 35 years ago and said, how would you like to be a volunteer? And I said yes. And of course I wound up being the chairman of the board. And it's my love next to real estate. It's my wife calls it my baby. So the second one is an organization over in New Jersey called Starting Point, and they help people, again, these are both nonprofit. They help people that have various addictions, alcohol, drugs, grieving, suicide, everything. And that's where I have one of my offices is there as well, and I do some counseling there as well for financial, because people usually have challenges like that because they got into a bind financially. They have 20 different counselors over there. And so that's Starting Point of New Jersey, and they're located on Highland Avenue. Again, anybody can Google this, and you can find out about it. And or, as I said, you can contact me if you know of a family member that may need some help in that area, either with CORA or with Starting Point. Feel free to contact me as well.
I can add those links too below the show notes and the page there, and then also your contact info, and I can add that along with the website and a phone number. But if you want to give that out now, Bill.
Sure. I have a general number, which I'll pick up, and it's an 800 number, 800-331-0202. Again, that's 800-331-0202. Leave a message. I'll be glad to get back to you. My website is AREII.com, which stands for American Real Estate Investors Institute. So those are the two ways they can get a hold of me. If you go to the website, you'll find my email there that you can contact me, or the telephone numbers will work as well.
All right. Well, as always, these interviews are great for me. I always learn so much, and I love talking to the brilliant people, as you're one of them, Bill. I appreciate you coming on the show here.
Well, I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share some of my knowledge and experience with the listening audience. You're one of the special people that doesn't mind sharing your knowledge as well. You know, you seek people out like myself and a number of others and have them on the show or bring them over to your real estate investment network group in Manayunk. And, you know, there's not too many people like you around, believe it or not. You know, most of the people, as you know, are close to the vest. They want to keep everything for themselves. But you know as well as I do that the more you give out, the more you get. And you don't do it for that purpose. You do it for the purpose of helping others. And that's one of the reasons why I agreed to come on the show. We both get a chance to help others in our experience and in our knowledge as well. And my blessings to everyone out there. And remember what I said, that if you help enough other people get what they want, you will get what you want. And I quoted that from an old-time friend of mine who passed away a year or so ago. A fellow by the name of Zig Ziglar, who was one of my mentors, as well as Jim Rohn and several others. Strongly recommend people that they read personal development books, at least one book a month, and that's going to help them move forward as well. It's going to boost them forward.
Nice. Appreciate that. Thanks again, Bill. And thank you all for listening to this episode of the REI Diamond Interview, your source for real estate investment jewels of wisdom. You can sign up to receive email notification of new podcasts and the weekly newsletter at www.reidiamonds.com. As a bonus for signing up, I'll even send you my free report on wholesaling titled 9 Steps to Buy and Sell a House with No Money. That website again is www.reidiamonds.com. Until next time, this is Dan Breslin signing off.
Thanks for listening to the REI Diamond Interview. To receive the REI Diamonds newsletter and interview monthly, sign up now at www.reidiamonds.com.